Hello guys, so after finishing all the review stuff about the GPD Pocket, I wanna do some quick and dirty content on it, and in this video I want to cover the Ubuntu Linux installation on the GPD Pocket a bit. Ubuntu Linux is one of the most popular Linux distributions and I personally really like using it. I think the UI is a lot more simple than Windows 10. It kind of reminds me a bit to Mac OS, has some similarities. I really like it. So GPD actually offers pre-made ISO files for the GPD Pocket, so you don't need to install drivers manually and all that stuff. You can download them on the official GPD website, which is gpd.hk, and then you go to Service, and here you go to Download, and then click on the latest firmware of GPD, and here you will then find a whole list of stuff for the GPD Pocket. You have the Linux firmware, you have some BIOS updates, you have the original Windows 10 image if you want to reinstall this one. You have also the drivers in case you want to go for a manual Windows 10 install, sound card driver, lots of stuff, and also the other GPD devices like the GPD Win and GPD XD are listed there with their firmwares. But the thing with Ubuntu is that those pre-made ISO files somehow don't work. I tried all of them and all of them do not boot. I mean, they start booting, but before actually starting the user interface, they throw an error at me that the media cannot be found for whatever reason. So the live environment can't be used and it also can't be installed. Now, there actually is a fix, and that's using community-made Ubuntu ISO files. And actually, those are supposed to work better according to some postings on Reddit, where the GPD Pocket is covered a lot. And I think one of the most easy to use and one of the best ready-made Ubuntu ISOs available for the GPD Pocket is the one by Nexus511. This guy also has a little blog here on which you can always download the latest release. His blog site is apd.nexus511.net, and there you can download ready-made ISO files for a couple of Linux distributions. You have Xubuntu, the normal Ubuntu, both 16.04.3 and 7.04. And you also have a Mint with XFCE and Mint Cinnamon. Ubuntu and Ubuntu GNOME is available as well. Ubuntu GNOME is a Ubuntu version that runs GNOME and not the Unity desktop developed by the Ubuntu project, which by the way is about to be discontinued or already is discontinued. So GNOME will be the default user interface for Ubuntu in the future. So yeah, lots of things to choose from. I personally went with Ubuntu 7.04 with the Unity interface because I prefer this one. So before you are installing Ubuntu Linux, and also if you keep running Windows, what I recommend you to do is to flash the Linux, the Ubuntu BIOS that's available on the GPD website. Because this one is unlocked, it does give you access to the full BIOS settings, so you can do some advanced customizations that might speed up your GPD Pocket significantly. And what I wanted to know is that this can also potentially damage your device, prevent it from booting up, so you do this on your own risk, and I'm not responsible for any damage you might do to your device by changing these settings. So I just want to quickly show you what settings I set for optimum performance there. So to get into the BIOS, you simply turn your GPD Pocket on, and then once the GPD logo appears, you start hitting the del key, delete, until the menu appears. So as you can see, the screen is rotated in the BIOS, so this is a little bit awkward to control, but you get used to this quickly. This is perfectly normal. And as you can see, with the unlocked BIOS, we have the Advanced tab available and also the Chipset tab available. On the standard BIOS that your GPD Pocket ships with, you only have the Security, Boot and Save and Exit tab available. So to change some important settings, you go to the Advanced tab and then you go down to CPU configuration. And here we'll see some settings. First, power technology, which is by default set to energy efficient. Set this to custom and then go down and make sure EIST is enabled, turbo mode is enabled, and HW all is enabled. And then you can also set the package C state limit to C7, which enables a deeper sleep mode to save energy in standby. Then you go back with the escape key and down to the thermal entry in the advanced menu. Hit enter and then open up the thermal configuration. And in this menu, you can basically configure the thermal throttling options of the SoC. And what I did there is to set all of them to 90 degrees Celsius on critical and 85 degrees Celsius on passive. What those settings basically do is to allow the processor to keep its maximum frequencies for a longer time. Now, this can lead to thermal issues. Now, it probably won't damage anything because the CPU shuts off if it does get too hot, but it can potentially damage your device. So you do this on your own risk, and please only change those settings if you know that your GPD Pocket is running cool. As far as I have heard from others, there are quite some differences between the GPD Pocket devices. Some run pretty hot, some run pretty cool. Mine does run pretty cool, so I don't have any issues changing those settings. But if yours runs hot, you probably shouldn't change those. So you're only gonna change the temperatures until you reach this Intel DPTF charger participant. There you stop and don't change anything further. What you can also do if you go further down in this menu, you will find the Intel Dynamic Power Performance entry and set this to disabled. By default it's enabled, but you can easily set this to disabled. Then you go back into the main menu and change the tab to chipset, and there you actually hit enter on the North Bridge entry. And what you're gonna do there is to enter the Intel IGD. IGD is Integrated Graphics Device, so it's the integrated GPU configuration. Hit enter and then don't change anything on the top. Go down and make sure to set IGD Turbo Enable to enabled. This enables the turbo mode of the GPU. And then you make sure that power meter lock is disabled, and you set the GFX boost to enabled, and you can also change the pre-allocated graphics memory to 512 megabytes, which isn't a bad thing to do. Then what you also want to do is to enable the IGD thermal option, because this actually allows the GPU to change its clock. If this is disabled, which is by default, it just always runs at its 600 megahertz, and this of course needs a lot of energy. Then you go back one level and here we'll find the memory configuration options, and what you can configure here is the RAM of the device. So hit enter on this one and here we'll see the frequency A selection. Now by default the RAM inside the GPD Pocket is clocked at 1066 megahertz, but it can go up to 1600 megahertz. You can change this by hitting enter here and then selecting the 1600 megahertz entry. But this can potentially cause the device to be unstable depending on the quality of the RAM chips inside of there. You just need to try this out. If it doesn't work out for you, set it back to 1067 megahertz. If it works for you, leave it at 1600 because it gives you a slight performance benefit. And then what you can also change in here is to disable the memory scrambler. Just set this to disabled. And that's basically it. You don't need to do anything more here. So then go back and change to the Save and Exit tab, and then you select Save Changes and Reset and hit enter and confirm with yes, and then your GPD Pocket will reboot. Now when you change those settings for the first time, the reboot will take a while. Your GPD Pocket will sit there with a blank screen and do nothing for a bit more than a minute. Don't turn it off, just wait for the process to finish. The device will boot automatically once this is finished. But again, remember, you only change anything in the BIOS at your own risk, because if your device is damaged, you likely have no chance to get the default settings of the BIOS back unless you flash it with some external flashing device using a backup of some other GPD Pocket. Now, when I installed Ubuntu and actually started using it, I was very much surprised in terms of performance, because Ubuntu actually performs much better than Windows 10. The performance is just insanely great. Let me just demonstrate this by opening a lot of applications and web pages and stuff. So let's first start with the file manager, then let's fire up Google Chrome. Let's also fire up Firefox. Then let's start the Facebook Messenger application. Let's start Thunderbird, which is an email client by Mozilla. And then let's start the LibreOffice Writer, the calculation application, Spotify, the Ubuntu Software Center. Let's also start the Ubuntu system settings. Let's start the terminal application. Then let's open up the Start menu, go to Applications and open up some more stuff here. What do we have? Just in case you wonder why I'm using an external mouse there, it's just a little bit faster than the internal trackpoint. So that's why I'm using the external mouse this time. Let's open up the calendar too. So now we have a lot of applications opened. Calendar, Terminal, Settings, Software Center, Spotify, Calculation, Writer, Thunderbird, Messenger, Firefox, Chrome. As you can see, also File Manager, I can switch between those applications very quickly. This works very well, and also the animations run fairly smooth. So now let's open some websites. First, chinamobilemac.de. As you can see, this pops up fairly quickly and I can scroll without any issues. It's really smooth. I can also use the touch screen to scroll in Google Chrome. As you can see, it runs very nice. And let's also open up YouTube, which is one of the more demanding websites. And as you can see, this one opens up very quickly as well. Place some advertisement there. Again, I can scroll very smooth, switch between the web pages without any problem. Very fast. Let's open some more. Let's open some news website. Maybe one more. Maybe some weather page in addition. So now we have a couple of websites open and still everything runs pretty smooth, which is not the case on Windows anymore, even when you only run the web browser. And remember that we are running a lot of applications in the background here, as you can see. Let's open some email. Works nicely. So the performance is really good on Ubuntu. Let's also open some websites here in Firefox. So as you can see, we still have a very decent performance here. And I mean, for such a small device, this is really surprising. I mean, the performance of Ubuntu easily is 2 or even 3 times better than on Windows. This is just great. It is a lot of fun to use, let me tell you that. It's just great if your system performs that good. Now, something that I personally find very interesting is that despite the higher performance, battery life is so much better than under Windows. If you watched my full review, you know that under Windows on average I got around 5 hours of operation time, continuous operation time on the GPD Pocket. Now on Ubuntu, this is much better. I get around 6 to 9 hours, which is depending on what I do. If I watch a Netflix stream, it can really last for a full 9 hours if the screen brightness isn't at 100%. On average, it's about 6, maybe 6.5 hours I get on Ubuntu, which is definitely a lot better than under Windows. But not only that, another thing that improved is Wi-Fi speed. Under Windows, I haven't been able to get much more than 50 Mbit per second of downstream. And on Linux, actually, I managed to reach the full AC Wi-Fi speed. This thing is supposed to reach with the Intel Dual Band AC Wi-Fi. So let's just do a live speed test while sitting right next to the router, and as you can see, the speed is much higher than it was under Windows. Right now I don't reach the full speed. I reached 1 day ago. There I reached 200 Mbit per second downstream, but roughly 100 Mbit per second still is much better than the 50 Mbit per second I reached under Windows. And actually, the better performance of the system isn't only visible when using normal applications, it's also the case when gaming. Under Windows, I haven't been able to run PC games even in low graphics settings with a halfway decent frame rate. They always showed a lot of stutter. And under Linux, I now installed Steam and installed a Dirt Showdown. And actually, on lowest graphic settings, lowest resolution and all settings set to low, this is fairly playable. I mean, frame rate is not perfect, but it's definitely better than under Windows. And this is really surprising. So better performance not only when working, but also when playing games. And actually, for Linux these days, you have quite a lot of games available, mostly thanks to the availability of Steam on Linux. So yeah, nice to see this. Now, one more thing that is better on Linux compared to Windows is audio quality. I don't know why, but somehow it does sound a lot better on Ubuntu. You got more bass and you can also get a higher volume without getting scratchy noises from the speaker. So definitely audio quality is improved a lot with Ubuntu, which probably has something to do with the speaker configuration, with the equalizer settings. The community settings just appear to be much better than the default settings under Windows, which is really nice to see. But likely you can get the same performance on Windows with some dedicated equalizer application. For example, Viper's audio is also available for Windows and should improve the quality a lot there. Anyhow, on Ubuntu it's good out of the box, which is nice. But not everything is good. Every once in a while the system freezes. I don't know why this is, but it definitely should be fixed. But the community edition of Ubuntu isn't ready on the Ubuntu on the GPD Pocket yet, so they are working on it, and this probably will improve with time. Another thing that still causes issues is Bluetooth. Now, for some people it does work. Some people have issues with transferring audio over Bluetooth, and for some people the Bluetooth doesn't even appear in the system, and as you can see, this is the case for me. No Bluetooth adapters found. Right after installing Ubuntu on the GPD Pocket, the Bluetooth dongle inside of it did work, but then it suddenly stopped after a kernel update arrived, and I actually have been too lazy to downgrade the kernel again to check if it's working again. So we will see if they bring this to a fully working state. Anyhow, Bluetooth doesn't really work right now on any device. There are various issues which render it useless basically. At best you can get a Bluetooth mouse running, but that's it. Another thing that still causes issues for some is the Type-C port here on the side. Some can transfer data. I can't confirm this. I have tried a USB-C hub on it, which offers 4 USB 3 ports, and all of them did work just fine. But actually the HDMI output of the USB Type-C port does not work, and also DisplayPort does not work. It does under Windows, but it does not under Ubuntu, so it's just not supported. Anyhow, you can use the dedicated micro HDMI port to attach a monitor to the GPD Pocket, and this one does work under Ubuntu, which is nice to see. And that's basically it about this quick overview on Ubuntu on the GPD Pocket. As you can see, it's a great operating system choice, not fully stable yet, but it has a lot of potential, and in my opinion makes the GPD Pocket even better because the performance is just great. If the community keeps developing this, and maybe even GPD keep developing their flavor of Ubuntu, getting run everything flawless, maybe even work together with the community, I'm pretty sure that most will prefer Ubuntu on the GPD Pocket over Windows. It's just the better choice for working, except you need some special applications that are only available on Windows. So that's it for this quick and dirty video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and see you soon with more content on Chinese devices. Bye bye.